It was certainly weird to see the president of the Teamsters union getting a primetime speaking slot at the Republican National Convention, and then on top of that, giving shout-outs back here in Missouri and Kansas. 8:05, good morning. It's great to be here on KCMO. We are 30 minutes away from our Tirade Tuesday segment, one of our premier segments of the week that is only as good as you make it out to be. So start prepping those tirades coming up in a half hour on KCMO Talk Radio. Sean O'Brien is the president of the Teamsters Union. And this, to me, was a signal of a changing Republican Party. A Republican Party that, for all of my lifetime, certainly, was really no friend of big unions. And the fascinating part of this yesterday is, this was in Milwaukee, of course, Wisconsin, where just over 10 years ago, one of the guys who was eyeballing a presidential run and did run for president was Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, who his claim to fame was breaking up a lot of the unions up there, going after, challenging a lot of the unions up there in Wisconsin. And he was a Republican hero. And now here's Donald Trump in, his continuing remake of the Republican Party being more cozy with big unions and giving, not just cozy with unions, but then giving the preeminent union a speaking spot at the Republican National Convention in a premier slot. I mean, this was 9 o'clock our time, so 10 o'clock Eastern, and Sean O'Brien gave a shout-out back here in the Kansas City area. Here was Josh Hawley's shout-out.
In my administration, the Teamsters reached out to 8 Republican senators who stood up for railroad Teamsters over our fight for paid sick leave. Josh Hawley was one of them. We started talking. Senator Hawley changed his position on national right to work. Then we started walking. Senator Hawley walked a Teamsters picket line in St. Louis and a UAW picket line in Wentzville, Missouri. More than that, I want to recognize Senator Hawley for his direct, relentless, and pointed questioning of corporate talking heads, lawyers, CEOs, and apologists. He has shown he is not willing to accept their pillaging of working people's pocketbooks.
By the way, somewhere, Lucas Kuntz, who's the Democrat against Josh Hawley this year, is crying in a corner somewhere. I mean, that's what Lucas Kuntz is doing right now as he hears that, because he's kind of running on the old school Democrat pro-union thing, and the head of the biggest union in the country shouts out Josh Hawley last night at the Republican National Convention. And Roger Marshall got a shout-out as well on the Kansas side by Sean O'Brien. So it's part of this remaking of the Republican Party that, yes, is still very much capitalistic in nature and about lowering taxes and, eliminating bureaucracies as much as you can and eliminating red tape as much as you can, while also being open to the idea of being pro-union. And that is a fascinating change in our political climate over the last generation, and Donald Trump's the only reason for it. Everybody else, let's be honest, has followed Donald Trump's lead, but there's been this calculation as well, a political calculation, that, listen, a lot of these people, a lot of union workers in particular, are middle class, traditionally probably, more conservative in their beliefs and their leanings, and there's frankly no reason they shouldn't be Republicans outside of the fact that the Democratic Party has had the lockdown on the union vote for well over a generation at this point. So it's Trump making a political calculation. And I could tell last night, I was flipping around TV after the O'Brien speech, and I could tell the media was freaking out over it. And that was one of my favorite parts of watching this last night. I was bouncing around, I'm not just going to sit there and watch Fox because, I love Fox. They're our partners here, but I want to see what everyone's saying. So I throw on a little News Nation. I throw on a little CNN. John, I'm all over the place. I love this part of the evening.
I'm not part of a union, so I only observe from outside here. But How much of this do you think we talk about union leadership? I think as being the one that's influencing and where the money goes as to who you endorse. The constituents, are the inmates beginning to run the asylum there in the union, where the leadership's going like, gosh, if we don't start catering to the crowd here,
yes,
we're going to start losing members?
I think that's a big part of it.
A bottom-up thing,
yes,
grassroots? Is that what
I think it's happened very much so over the last 10 years. Where suddenly more union members are voting Republican, and leadership is like, well, maybe we better follow our the people who are paying the dues around here. There's a novel concept.
Who's buttering the bread?
Yes, bingo. So I think that's part of it for sure. And I believe there's major concern within the media establishment and the Democratic Party that the Republican Party could be the one that, if not becomes the party of the union worker, at least the Democratic Party does not have that on lockdown. So on CBS last night, I'm watching like Norah O'Donnell and who's the other? Oh, Major Garrett. Is that his real name, Major Garrett? Like, does someone like have their child and say his name is Major? Or I honestly don't know if Major Garrett's real name is Major Garrett. But, he kind of has the whole thing going. He's got the whole, he looks like he's trying to live up to the name Major Garrett.
Seems like East Coast boarding school.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess his real name is Major Garrett. I just can't imagine, kid pops out and you're like, all right, his name is Major. But anyway, Major Garrett, Norah O'Donnell, these people, they're freaking out last night. And Norah O'Donnell says, and I'm watching this in real time, she goes, well, Trump cut corporate taxes, and Sean O'Brien, the head of the Teamsters union, is railing on corporations. And I'm thinking to myself, she's missing the point here. I know she's trying to be like, you can't be pro-union and pro-Republican. They cut taxes. Well, first off, if you're a union worker, they're completely separate topics. They have nothing to do with each other. Two things can be true at once here when you talk about economic growth. Cutting corporate taxes or any taxes is good policy. More money that you get to keep as a worker or a corporation that you generate is good policy. That's true for individuals or for businesses. It allows for economic expansion, growth, research and development, and continuing to grow the economic pie. But also, yes, paying workers is vitally important to the sustainability and growth of the said businesses. They're separate ideas and they work in conjunction with each other. But CBS's panel is like, oh my goodness, Trump cut corporate taxes. How could you possibly be, a Trump voter if he's cutting corporate taxes? Because corporate taxes are irrelevant from paying your people. In fact, theoretically, if you cut taxes, then businesses have more money to pay their people. Whoa, I can't believe it.
Talk about a bombshell.
What a concept. And by the way, what happens then, though? The media is like, well, if you suggest if you think that people paying less taxes or the rich not paying their fair share is a good thing, then you don't want to help the little guy. We need to help people with the government's, air quotes, help. The data doesn't back it up. In 2022, the U.S. government collected the highest total revenue in its history. More taxes were collected in 2022 than any year in American history. And that came under the policies of the Trump tax cuts, which lowered the corporate taxes substantially and also did lower individual taxes a little bit. So that doesn't even work. Jim's in Blue Springs. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, what John was talking about, you and John, actually it's been going on for about 30 years. The members of a lot of unions have been voting Republican. They don't believe, and they can see the Democrats were lying for years. I mean, they shut down this pipeline how many times, and that was a lot of jobs. We had a lot of people in our local that were doing the trucking up there to all those delivery sites, and they just lost their job. And then you have all the steel workers making the steel pipe losing their job. It's been going on for years, and people are finally sick of it.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point there, Jim. Thank you, man. And this has been, I guess, a 30-year trend. And then what you've seen is, Donald Trump figure out how to capitalize on it politically. But I never thought I'd see Sean O'Brien, head of the Teamsters Union, get a primetime speaking spot at a Republican National Convention. Now, I got more here on this, 8:20. It's good to be here on a busy Tuesday morning. Tirade Tuesday's 15 minutes away. So, some polling data. John brought up this idea about Sean O'Brien, the Teamsters union president who spoke last night at the Republican National Convention, who gave a shout out to Josh Hawley here in Missouri and Roger Marshall in Kansas as being pro-union Republicans. It turns out in large part he may be realizing that he's got to be loyal to his members. So back in 2016, Trump only lost union households by 8% to Hillary Clinton. That was the Republicans' best showing since Ronald Reagan back in 1984. Now, Joe Biden restored his party's dominance in 2020, winning 57% of union households compared to Trump's 40%. But recent polling is showing Biden crashing with union households. So the Teamsters union, Sean O'Brien, their president, has had a front row seat to this transformation amongst his own union members. And not only did he get up there and give a speech that was, very good for a changing Republican Party and also very good for, a changing Teamsters union, but he wasn't up there just with the platitudes. I mean, take a listen to what Sean O'Brien had to say before he started talking about guys like Josh Hawley and Roger Marshall.
Of hearing from new, loud, and often critical voices. And I think we all can agree, whether people like him or they don't like him, in light of what happened to him on Saturday, he has proven to be one tough SOB.
That was Sean O'Brien last night. Now, since 2019, here's the thing that needs to be noted as well. The Teamsters Union has given 99% of its $9 million in advocacy spending to liberal causes. Will that change? Will there be more of an uprising amongst union members who are like, hold on a second here. If your members are split 50-50 and certainly trending one way or the other, one way over the other, you're going to give 99% of your advocacy spending, which is our money. It's your money, by the way. If you're a Teamsters member, Teamsters, union member, you're going to be happy with that. And that's what Sean O'Brien has to begin addressing as this shift continues to take place. 913-408-7957. Scooter's in Lawrence. He is a member of the Teamsters Union. Scooter, good morning.
Morning. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. What's happening?
Well, so as a Teamsters member,
let's
I'm at work right now.
Yeah, let's try to get in a good spot there, my man.
I just, I stayed up late. I watched Sean's speech last night, and I knew it would be divisive because half the members don't support it and half of them do. But all I saw last night is him calling for people to come together and work together. That's what I got out of it, and I hope that's what happens.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. That's that. So, has there been talk about it this morning at work? Since you're obviously there.
Absolutely. So, I would say it's probably divided 60-40 for Republican right now.
60-40 Republican.
So, and I mean, I've been a Republican my whole life. I'm only 37, so a lot of people look at me and go, "Oh, how come you're not a liberal?" Well, I'm sorry. I have a brain.
Hey, don't be sorry. Okay, don't be sorry.
But I just wanted to make it short and sweet and basically say what I saw from him is him calling for everybody to work together, and I don't see why both sides can't work side by side to come up with labor policies.
Yeah, that's a great point. And by the way, what do you do for a living out there?
I'm a truck driver.
All right, man. Well, you keep doing the good work, and we appreciate you listening to KCMO.
Thank you very much.
All right. Have a great day. That is Scooter out there in Lawrence, a Teamsters member as well. Steve is in KCK. What's up, Steve?
Hey, Pete, what I saw last night, that was just one hell of an encore to an awesome evening. And I think maybe Sean O'Brien is waking up and realizing that scab labor affects us all, whether you're a collective bargainer or not. I was a truck driver, and I made a pretty good wage because there's a Teamsters union, because there's collective bargaining going on. The company that I worked for had to compete with that labor. And so even though we weren't union, because there's a union, there is a a way to work together on this. Just because you believe in collective bargaining, I think he can also recognize that influx of migrants and scab labor hurts us all on both sides. And for Sean O'Brien, who just 6 months ago said billionaires shouldn't even exist, and then comes out, and to me that's an endorsement. What he said about Trump, that sounded like an endorsement. And to have the Teamsters get an endorsement of Teamsters, I think Trump could get 100 million votes. I believe it's possible. Thanks, Pete.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it, Steve. There's no doubt that Donald Trump is remaking, as he has over the last 8 years, the Republican Party. He started that process in 2016, getting more of that working class voter. That's how he, won most of the upper Midwest. He broke that blue wall that Democrats had relied on for at least a generation, the Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania blue wall. Trump broke it up. And whether it was, Josh Hawley being one of his advocates in the U.S. Senate here in Missouri, guys like Roger Marshall also, opening up to having these conversations with union workers. Steve brings up a great point. I mean, if you're a union worker and you want to keep wages high for yourself and your members, guess what? Flooding the country with 12 million people is something that you should care about. Beyond safety, beyond all those other issues, fentanyl pouring into the country, beyond all that, it's just something that you should care about when you talk about jobs, when you talk about, driving down the cost of labor on some of these jobs. And that's where Democratic Party is hurting itself in a big way. A big way. It feels like the only constituency they've got left are, wokesters in Northeast Johnson County. That's it. That's the core. Now it feels like they're losing the union worker. You're seeing the working class minority voter not 100% switch, but start to move away. And these things are going to impact them in a big way if they're not careful.